Welcome back to the Respect the Drive podcast, coming to you from Garage 42 in Acton, where we have our new podcast studio. I store my cars here because it's the perfect place to store your cars. They're always ready for me. They're always clean. If I need wheels, tires, mounted, balanced, whatever, well, they've got the equipment now. So if you've got to store your car in Massachusetts, or maybe you're someone who just has no space for the things that you love to play with, but you want to make sure that they're not getting eaten by mice and just becoming someone else's barn find someday, well, this is the spot to go. Check out Garage 42, Acton, Massachusetts, for all your storage needs. I am pretty psyched to be here right now because I've got a good friend of mine, and he has some wild stories for you. He's now on a pit crew, which, you know, I always knew him as a mechanic. It's my friend Conor Houlihan. Before we get into your career, I got to tell you, I've been trying to enjoy my own cars more lately. It's hard because my job is literally driving cars. So when it comes to the weekends, sometimes it's not my first priority to jump in a car and go on a road trip. But buying the Lexus GX 460 opened the door to a daily driver, which now means that the Honda is resting most of the week, which means like, well, I got to go drive the Type R or the Porsche or the M5 on the weekend. So this weekend, I went out and I made a video about this, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. Not because of what I did, but because of the Instagram comments that I got from this, right? So I found out that there's this fighter jet that went down in the Quabbin Reservoir in 1955. It didn't next to the reservoir. So it's in the woods.
Yeah. It sounds like it happened a while ago, too.
Sure. 19 to 70 years ago. So pilot ejects, runs out of fuel, ditches the plane goes down, and it's an L-94 Starfire. So it's old Lockheed Korean War era fighter jet. One of the first like fighter jets that exist, right? Like this is kind of a cool thing. But goes down and the parts are still there. You know, it crashed. You can go hike to the thing. And I'm like, well, this will be great because I'll go for a drive. I'll be out in like some nice, you know, central Massachusetts back roads. There's some desolate things out there. So you can go push a car around a corner a little bit, you know, have some fun.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, I'll go for a run when I'm there because I'll run to the jet. So I get to the jet, I take a couple pictures, and there's this one picture, and I took a very YouTube-y picture. I didn't take it for Instagram. I actually took it for some friends who I had told about this, and they said, no way, there's a jet in the woods. So I took this picture, and it's a selfie where I'm pointing to the wreckage behind me, and I said, found a crashed jet in the woods. And I'm smiling, okay? Now, I think if most people saw this, they would think like, whoa, cool, there's like a wreck in the woods. I got so many comments that said at least one of two things. One, oh my God, you need to report this to the FAA. Or two, oh, real nice, smiling with a selfie where people died. As if it's like a 737 MAX 8 that like nosedived into the world.
They're assuming the FAA doesn't know, which they do, and it happened forever ago. And also they're assuming someone died, which like isn't the case.
Also, they're assuming that I'm so heartless that I'm sitting there smiling at this site. I'm thinking, you motherfuckers visit Pompeii, and you're probably smiling at the volcanic wreckage. You know, anyway, either way, nobody died, and the FAA is very aware of this crash.
I feel like they usually are when it comes to plane crashes. It's kind of their thing.
And all this to say is the comments, while stupid and silly, I have to admit that the consistent, pervasive influx of feedback is not healthy, and it's not conducive for like a good, stable mental state. So I can, you know, I'm definitely, I've reached that sort of critical mass in the size of the platform now where it is a daily occurrence. So even if 99% of things are like positive or, hey, cool, or just like, you know, hi, sure, great. You will notice the strange things and you will absorb a collective negativity.
Oh yeah.
Through this and feeling like you have to explain yourself about stuff is really frustrating. Imagine like always having to explain yourself.
Yeah, I very much pity that you have to deal with that because it's not. Yeah, I just don't like to have to explain myself to everyone. I'm like, oh, this is the thing that I did, or and take it or leave it. Like, it's kind of how it is.
I'm using this intro as like a therapy session. So if you guys hate this, just skip ahead. We'll get to Conor shit really soon. But I did a video. Once in a while, I do like tutorial videos. So I did like how to drive a manual transmission. 6 million views. Like, that's awesome. Really nice because I feel like I've done my part as a car enthusiast to teach like 6 million people how to either drive for the first time or do a little better, with their rev matching or
Absolutely.
whatever. That's cool. I did a video recently where I'm like, you know what? I keep getting railroaded at merges, like onto a highway where people just keep standing on the brakes. And I'm like, I can't believe I have to make this video, but I feel compelled to make this video. So I just did how to merge onto the highway. Most of the comments are great. I got a comment yesterday that was, how could we possibly take advice from such a reckless driver? 74 miles per hour in a 65 mile an hour zone. And that was like the thesis of my recklessness.
And it wasn't like sarcastic. Like
no, it was
being completely
super
deadpan with it.
Connor, would you have the audacity to go 74 miles an hour on an American highway?
It depends who's listening, but 9 miles an hour is usually within the wiggle room.
I guess
that I found.
I guess it's all to say that like when you put yourself out there, you are putting yourself out there to everyone, including morons. Really, really, really stupid people.
Yeah, that's one of the joys of the internet is everyone's on it, and unfortunately, everyone's on it.
And this has compelled me now to hide Instagram from my home screen. Today was day 1, and
awesome.
Fuck, it felt so good.
Oh yeah,
Connor, it's the best.
Oh yeah,
I get it. I get it. I'm like, oh, I'm falling into, and I was spending too much time on this stuff, and I feel healthier.
Yep.
It's been 24 fucking hours, dude.
Oh yeah, but we have no like real studies on how this affects us, right? We don't know. Like I'm a firm believer that someone shouldn't be able to be reached at any given moment. I've had friends point out to me before, they're like you're on their phone or whatever, and they're like, hey, remember, that's for your convenience.
Right.
And so many people don't look at it that way.
Yeah.
If I could go back to I guess I could, but if it was socially acceptable to go back to a time where you just had a flip phone in a glove box, like if you needed to call a tow truck or you wanted to reach out to somebody, you could, but it was acceptable to like not pick up.
Could you imagine?
It'd be awesome. Like,
could you imagine?
It'd be lovely to like, hey, you know where I'm at? I'm probably here, or here. If I'm none of those places, you're probably not gonna find me. Maybe call me.
I've been like doing that focus mode thing a little more too, where I just don't like, oh my God, not answering a text message. Oh, what a luxury.
Oh yeah.
What a luxury. So the other thing is I think having so much social media in our lives isn't just about like, oh, I think it's ruined the way we engage with people, because I got a message, an Instagram, YouTube comment the other day, and it was really simple. It was on a pretty rare Mercedes. It was a 5-speed ZF in a, what was it? Like a 250 SL. So like this gorgeous silver arrow kind of like stuff. Oh, what a fucking car. It's like 1960, 7, 8, I don't remember. Whatever. Doesn't matter. Yeah. Either way, it's gorgeous. It's one of the best. Honestly, it's one of the best cars I ever driven. It's so good. And the comment had a lot of great information in it. It was like, wow, like the 250s are great, but like the 230 engines actually ran smoother because the 4-bearing engines were blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what an interesting thing, right? Except that it started with, silver. How miserable and drab. Another boring silver Mercedes. And then it was like, and another thing. And it went on. And then there was all this great information. I'm like, dude, you could have like just deleted the first 25% of this comment, and I would have been like, what a knowledgeable, impressive person.
Oh yeah.
But instead I'm like, what a fucking asshole.
You just had to cut through all that. They had to lead with all of the garbage, and then you're like, oh well, you actually had something nice to say that was like helpful. You didn't choose to say it originally.
And this condescending, know-it-all bullshit style of speech is the same reason why I don't like going to car shows, because I hate walking around and listening to someone point at something and be like, oh, those are pieces of shit. Or they see an E46 M3 and they're like, oh my God, I thought it was good, but it's SMG. And you're like, oh my God, like the dude in a wheelchair, the veteran, the fucking Purple Heart Plate guy is sitting next to the car, and you're shitting on the transmission, not realizing why he's driving an SMG.
Right. Also, SMGs, like hot take, aren't the worst. Yeah.
It's just like, you could just walk past the thing.
Absolutely. And so many people don't know how to do that, but I'm very choosy about where, like, there was a point in time where I went to like every show that was around, and that like ended quickly. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to spend my time going to shows that I feel like I won't, I go to see my friends and the dogs.
Yeah.
But
get this right in front of your face. Yeah. There we go.
It's, I go to see my friends and the dogs. I was actually this Sunday while a couple of friends of ours were going for a cruise to get some candy. I was at Volkswagen Dust Off, the Volkswagen Audi show at Thompson. And that show is just phenomenal. They host it every single year as like a season opener for Volkswagen Audi only.
I've never been, but it is something that is part of the zeitgeist. Like I am fully aware that when like I don't like look forward to it because I've never been. And it's not because I don't look forward to it. It's just that when I hear that it's happening, I'm like, oh, it's car season.
Oh yeah, 1000%. It's the first thing that every single year, and the ongoing joke is it's going to happen rain or rain. Rains every year. And this is the first time that it's like been it's still sprinkled a little bit. Rain or rain still applies. But it was the first time that we've had nice weather in so long, and the turnout was massive. And I was running around on like a Razor scooter I stole from Kyle.
Yeah.
Like the whole time he had a cowboy hat and was telling people how to park. It was phenomenal.
That's the best. So this is, I guess, my through line from all my like negativity Instagram bullshit is that the real world has a lot of good shit to offer.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You're one of those things. You have the best energy. I had Thanasi on here last week. Mm-hmm. Another one of those dudes who I just think like brings good energy to the community, where like I see when I run into you, because you run a lot of car shows, like you're helping out at a lot of car shows, I instantly I'm like, I'm in the right spot.
Awesome.
And that,
much appreciated.
I think a lot of people feel that way when they see you, but what they may not know is your history and like your actual skill set, because your face is synonymous with like Boston car community, mm-hmm. which is wild because you're younger in the car community against all the yuppie racing guys. I mean,
yeah, relative to the rest of the group that I'm with, I'm on the younger side, I suppose. I don't feel young anymore, but they've all been at it for a while.
I still see you as like a baby. Like I'm like, oh, good, but then I'm like, man, you do everything, and so. But you know, everyone sees you on these events. Everyone knows that you're the guy helping. Like, oh, park here at Lars Anderson at Cars and Coffee, all that stuff. But what they may not know is what your day job is. So, right. First, like, when did you're a mechanic essentially, right? If we just like said, hey, like if we had to pick one word to define your occupation, mechanic, but that's not even close to describing what context you do this in, because now you're working for Turner Motorsport as like IMSA pit crew.
Yeah, yep. That's it took like a little while to settle in for that. This is my third. I'm in the middle of my third season. Well, I suppose the beginning of my third season with them. And like you actually saw me at my first race ever at Daytona. You were down there with Acura, and I was like, "Oh, hi, buddy." And they're like, "How do you already know down here?"
Dude, it was so I couldn't have been more excited that the person I knew in a paddock was you.
That's awesome.
Because you look psyched.
Oh, dude, I was thrilled.
You look terrified, but psyched.
Yeah. It's changed a bit since then. Less terrified, definitely, I would say equally psyched, but definitely less terrified.
All right. So for folks that are out there who are like in the, I don't know, car repair world, like you didn't just like show up to Turner and be like, hey guys, I'd like to wrench on some cars. Like,
no. And I didn't do it thinking that it was going to be full Ricky Bobby moment, that like one day the driver was going to go take, you have to take a leak and eat a chicken sandwich, and I was just going to want to go fast. Like that doesn't happen. Sorry, everyone.
Where did you start? Because really, if we really go back, like you're a restaurateur, or at least the son of a restaurateur. So, your dad owns a couple of restaurants. We can plug the shit out of those because they're fantastic.
Totally will.
Yeah. The Parrot. We've got
we got the Parrot.
Tinker's Son
in Norwell, which is awesome. Bistro in Cohasset.
I didn't know that one.
Oh, it's the first one, 20 years old. And it's a French bistro, which actually there's a perfect segue from that to the career path I took. I'll make that in a second.
Let's go.
Then we got Trident and Hang On, which is awesome. I worked there for a while. I've worked at Tinks for like 15 years. But and we also have Galley, Kitchen Bar, and Situate. So they're all South Shore within 20 minutes of each other. But it's, I grew up in that environment. The segue that I've got for that is my dad is a restaurateur, but chef by trade, and opened his first restaurant when I was like 7, and has been lucky and worked hard enough to still have still make it work. And God, what a brutal industry to work in, just financially, and to make things work is difficult. To make it work across 5 restaurants? 5.5. We got a food truck that does some stuff sometimes.
Like, holy shit. I don't know. Your dad is one of those dudes that I can't believe he has a smile on his face when you see him, because you're like, how do you function?
Oh, yeah.
There's so much going on in his life, but he always is just like full of stories, good vibes, great time, and he will 100% say yes to a drink with you.
1,000%. Yeah. And he is partially responsible for the car habit, hobby, lifestyle that I have, and 1,000% responsible for the work ethic that's got me to where I am now. And there's a bunch of people that helped me along the way, and we'll get to those too. But he said something super formidable to me originally, and so he's a French trained chef. And when he was coming up, he was working for like no money and like the best restaurants in Ireland. He's Irish. He moved here when he was 18. He's from Cork. It's as far south in Ireland as you get, as far as counties go. And
big tech industry in Cork. I know, like EMC or
now
it's Dell, I guess.
So.
But
it's I haven't been back there in a long time. I want to go. I went a bunch as a kid. I still got like half my family over there.
Oh shit.
But it's it's actually fun, like little sidebar. We were there when Fast and Furious 5 came out. And I've been back since then, but not much since then. And it came out a week earlier in Ireland and Europe than America. So I went to opening night in Ireland, and all the quote unquote like raced out Civics you'd see here were all like Volkswagens there. Because it was just what was like prominent.
That's what's there. They all have like 1.6 liter diesels and
but like all like stereotypical 2011 JDM'd out. It was hilarious. And I remember going to opening night there and then coming to opening night here and just seeing the difference was so funny. I always like those like nuances. But it's so my dad's classically trained and always like performed at that sounds better. I support that. Always performed at like a very high level. So it was kind of like, all right, if you're going to school, and if you're going to work somewhere, you're going to do it at the highest level that you can, because it can all trickle down. So the first restaurant's a French bistro, great, cute date night spot. The second restaurant's an Irish pub. As far as cuisine goes, there's a shift, there's a difference. And if you can do a French bistro, you can do a lot of justice to an Irish pub.
Yeah.
But going the other way is harder. If you were coming from an Irish pub trying to do bistro stuff, it's a harder shift to make.
Sure.
And the sidebar with that, I guess, or the transition is, I always wanted to go to school for Chrysler. I'm a big Mopar guy as far as that stuff goes. I don't think there's a better car for me than a Gen 5 Viper. There just isn't.
They're pretty great.
Oh, they're so good.
I could see you in like a 69 Roadrunner too.
Yeah, that thing's super sweet. And it's just, I love everything that modern SRT has done and the attitude that Mopars had throughout the years. I like a variety of things. Obviously, I work on BMWs and, was into Volkswagens for a long time. Still am, but just have shied away from the front wheel drive side of life. And I always wanted to go to school for Chrysler. I wanted to work for SRT and just kind of do that type of stuff where I wanted to be part of something that mattered so much to me, around passionate people, and, be part of a bigger thing.
Sure.
And that's, I feel that, modern Dodge does a very, very good job at that.
They have maintained their DNA in a way that very few car companies have. Like, everyone keeps some like little bits and pieces, but I don't see much E46 M3 in a modern day BMW.
No,
Sure, you can say there's an inline six, great. But
sure.
I mean, we look at SRT, maybe it's just because it's the same fucking car, right. But like, so what they've been doing since like the 1960s feels like what SRT is today.
Right.
Which
and
is cool.
I think this is part of their catchphrase, but it's unapologetic. That's exactly, how they always have been. And there's this little nuance with the speedometers and the Challengers where like you get a V6 one and I think it goes up to like 100 and maybe it's got 160 speedo or 140. I'm not sure. I have an RT Classic. It's just a 5.7 Hemi, but the speedo goes to 160. The car will do 163. You have that like old school pin the needle, go past the thing that the Scat Packs that'll do 185. The speedo goes to 180. And the Hellcats are 200 and relative, if you've got a Charger or it's not stock, it can go past that. And that type of detail is just something I've always appreciated, and Dodge does that very well.
So that's what's getting you into the vibe of like, I want to work on these cars. I want to be around these cars.
That's why I wanted to work for SRT and like, be part of that, because I'm like, okay, these guys pay attention to stuff that, maybe a percentage of the people that buy the car are going to look into and check. You know, and sure, you slap an RT badge on a Grand Caravan and it can't do RT stuff, but it's a lot of, they can kind of stand with what they have. And so I always thought that was cool. The transition to that is I didn't go to school for Chrysler. I could have, and I didn't. And my dad and I were going back and forth, and he's like, "Hey, you should go for the highest level stuff. You should go." And I was like, "Yeah, well, I really want to work at Chrysler." He's like, "Yeah, it's great, man. But if you want to work anywhere besides Chrysler, it's going to be harder to get there than coming from a quote unquote higher, difficulty brand."
So he makes a good point, because if you start somewhere, with a more luxury or performance oriented, like known brand than, let's say, Chrysler or Dodge,
sure,
they're not like, "Oh, well, you're just a Dodge mechanic." Right.
And that is a thing that some people think of, and
which is really silly, though.
It's crazy, but
it's a fucking car.
1,000%. And all cars are hard to work on, it's not like they're not, but I wanted to, when I was choosing schools and stuff, I was like, okay, well, I want to go to school for Chrysler, and if I still feel like this way, and Chrysler being Mopar, it was FCA at the time.
Sure.
It's Stellantis now.
Yes. The lost city of Stellantis.
Exactly. But I ended up going to school for BMW. And this was at Mass Bay Community College up in Framingham, the Ashland line.
Yeah.
They've got a BMW ADP program. So I was like looking at UTI, and I was looking at, Wildtech and stuff like that. And there was like generic automotive programs.
For those who are listening with your girlfriends or wives, UTI is Universal Technical Institute, not urinary tract infection, which is fucking insane.
Yeah.
That these people named this UTI.
Yeah, you'd think they'd pick a different acronym, but it's, they know more than I do when it comes to that type of marketing stuff.
Anyway, I mean, like, I really want a UTI shirt because I think it's funny.
Yeah.
Sponsored by like some antibiotic. Anyway, so you end up going to Mass Bay for this BMW thing.
Yep, I go to, with his advice, and he's able to essentially talk some sense into me. He's like, you like European cars, you've always liked Volkswagen. My dad had some cool Volkswagens growing up. That I was able to, be around, and I was like, oh, this is cool. They're quirky and they're fun and, fast. They weren't fast, but they felt fast.
Yeah.
And he's like, go to school for BMW. I was like, okay. Because you could go for Mercedes, but through the UTI program, you had to go to school at the time. I don't know if this is still the case, but you had to go through the Ford program. And then if you were like good enough or accepted, you could go then through Mercedes like Star program. And I was like, yeah, that's great, but like I don't want to go to school for Ford and then potentially not get picked.
What if you're not in the top of your class?
And then I have got a Ford degree that that's as you heard in the last 3 minutes of me talking about Chrysler, not my favorite American brand. I don't it's not for me. They make some really cool stuff. It's just I prefer.
You don't have to defend it.
Yeah, I just prefer push rods. I guess
there's no comments on this. Don't worry. You say whatever the fuck you want. No one's. You're not going to hear any feedback.
Well, fair enough. Yeah, but it's like that's a risk I'm not willing to take for. And I was always BMW over Mercedes, anyways. So I was like, let me go to school for BMW. And I had a fantastic instructor when I was there, Nick Pavlovsky. He does all sorts of aftermarket, like ECU stuff. He did stuff with M-Tron for a long time. He's always done some track stuff. And he was like, oh, wow, you're enthusiastic? Like, let's show you some stuff.
Yeah. And
like complete game changer. If I didn't have him for my second year of college, like I probably wouldn't have went through.
Yeah.
Like I would have just been like, you know what? It's my first year of college was like basic mechanic stuff and like intro to BMW. And my high school, I went to a technical high school, had covered me so well in that type of stuff that I could have skipped the first year entirely. Like it was all people who had never worked on a car before, but I already had taken 2 years of automotive in high school and paid attention, which helps.
Yeah.
And my high school shop teachers were fantastic and, very much helped guide me down this path.
But it's critical that you had someone that you admired or at least wanted, like inspired you to do more. I think we forget sometimes that we are occasionally that person for someone else.
Yeah, it's definitely a thought on my mind sometimes where it's like you never know who you're talking to or what they're, looking up to. So you got to like try to not be the worst anytime.
Well, and you try also to not be like the typical sort of New England attitude is like self-deprecation it's a little grumpy. We bond through trauma. Like, I feel like that's how New Englanders get on. Like, if I said, how's your day? You're like, it's all right, but, right? And it's like the but is where it's like, yeah, I'm having a rough one too, because blank, and I feel like that's kind of how New Englanders typically get on. Whereas like, I think in the rest of the country, it's more about like, oh, everything's great. Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's a little different. And I have to consciously not do that. And I think that the reason I'm saying that is if you have someone who's like maybe looking up to you, that self-deprecating shit.
Yeah. It's not great.
They're not, well, they're going to be like, oh, that's not my thing.
It's just not a good look in general. Like it's like when you're talking with your friends, everyone actually knows you. So you're like, I can say whatever I want. And they like, opposed to like, you're like, oh, that guy's kind of negative. You're like, I'm not at all. Right. It's just kind of how it comes off sometimes.
All right. So this guy keeps you invigorated into this BMW program.
Keeps me invigorated to BMW because he's like, this is the performance brand. He was like, he drove an E39 M5 every day with like 250,000 miles.
Love to see it.
Just like had it in the snow. Like he's like, if I can make it to school in my M5, you guys can make it in your cars.
Yes.
And we ended up.
Shout out to Nick.
He's the best. I had an E36 at the time, a 325 IS.
This is the one that you put the Trans Am like Firebird screaming chicken on it.
Yeah, that's how we met. It's
I'm sure I probably met you with that hood.
Yeah, you were like walking through like full, like almost like camcorder style at that time.
Oh, I was vlogging
I think so.
Oh my
God.
it's
I've got like 0 photos of that car. I've got like less than a handful because everyone had just started the Instagram build cars. And I was so against that I was like, build your car for whatever you want and like be creative with it. But like if you're building a car, like I didn't have my Instagram handle on my car. I was like, I don't want you to think that I did this for you.
It's still gross when people have Instagram handles on their car.
Yeah, just not for me. It also seems like a great way to just get entrapped in like a takeover, like hot, like situation. I'm all set. I don't need a stranger to know my name and on the street. It's all good.
No.
But like, I've got no pictures of that car. But for those who are wondering, how could you put a bunch of Pontiac parts on an E36? The answer is like a lot of curiosity and arguably too much whiz wheel. And if you've got a couple of friends that like just like to slam stuff together, you might end up with a shaker hood riveted into the hood of an E36. If someone wants a picture of this, maybe there's one. I still have the hood somewhere.
Looked good, yeah.
And the Snowflakes, the Pontiac Snowflakes, the 15-inch, the coolest 15-inch wheel ever, fit on that car roughly if you did like a stud wheel stud conversion.
Sure.
So I was like, okay, these are going on because you could get them for like $100, and I'm not into like stuff everyone else has. So those went on, and then I got a duckbill spoiler. I had an original Trans Am spoiler I was trying to fit, but it's all like through bolted through the trunk, and it just didn't work. So I got like a duckbill spoiler, and then had Vauxhall, which is the car club I've been a part of forever.
Local,
done up in the back in Trans Am font.
Dude, all right. So if anyone was one, I think that just gave people a good insight into your personality. Oh, yeah. Is that you Trans Amified in E36?
Yeah, and that's back when these cars were $1,400, and I still would do that. I just haven't. But yeah, it had all the Trans Am stuff on it aesthetically, which was funny, but then I built a limited slip diff for it in class with Nick. And like flipped the ramps and added a couple clutches, and did like it also had a half cage and Cobra buckets from HMS when they were up here, and harnesses. And it was just like, my friends used to joke that you'd never saw the headlights without seeing the taillights. Like the car was arguably never straight. Like it was always, and it was like low horsepower, 15-inch like Dunlops. Like it was just so much fun, and it was just tossing a car around and like having a blast. It wasn't any takeover garbage. It was just like having fun as you would in a beater rear wheel drive car back when cars were beaters that were rear wheel drive cars and like cheap.
And did you start, so after school, did you just go straight into a dealer and kind of play that network game where you're like, okay, now I'm starting out as a mechanic at a local whatever?
I'm glad you asked that. So like as far as like leading up to the kind of school thing, I was working in dealers and shops before then. Like I started early. I apprenticed for a lovely little garage. This Pete, he's like my, uncle. He's amazing. When I was like 15. And it was like, I had to go my first job there was to polish all the chrome in a 61 Thunderbird.
Oof, that's a lot of chrome.
Yeah, I got a sunburn. It took a while. And he's an old school mechanic he could fix anything from, an old Jaguar C-Type to like a brand new 750 at the time. Like he's got that, bandwidth that is amazing.
That's very rare.
Super rare. He's fantastic. And I'm very thankful for the time I still get to spend with him. He's awesome. And I was working for him because he's let me sweep the floors and showing me stuff, and just being around cars. I was going there as often as I could. It was great, like apprentice for him, and then I'd go work for my dad at night. So it's like, make some money, but then also like go learn some stuff and bother this guy and clean up his shop in hopes that he shows me things.
And this is before you were going to school, or this is while you were going to school?
This is when I was in high school.
Oh, wow.
Or 15. Yeah, high school.
Dude.
It was before I could drive. I was taking a moped there.
Oh, you're killing me here, because this is one of those times when you kind of feel like when you see a race car driver who's in their 20s and you're like, wow, how'd you get there? They're like, well, when I was 5 years old, I got in my first go-kart, and then I was winning my first races by 7. And like you're 19 and you're like, well, fuck, it's too late for me. So all right. So high school, you're doing
one on a karting track, and I realized that was too late for me. But it's for the path that I took, I started as early as I could because I was working as early as I could from the family restaurants, and I was used to that. And it's like, hey, you want a car? You got to go out and save money and get a car.
Gotcha.
And like, you want to work, like you should start working, because my dad started working so young because he's European and that's what they do. And it's that work ethic thankfully translated over to me. I would like to say he can feel free to check me.
It's obvious. It's obvious. You bust your ass.
I try to.
So now you've come out of school. What's your first professional role?
So first professional role out of school was high school. Volkswagen Bluetooth kid. They're like, hey man, show people how to use their phone. I said, yeah, sounds great, but can I go in the shop?
You're like the first person to be like the BMW genius, but it was just because no one knew how to pair their like Nokia phone.
Yeah, it was just like, dude, everyone was like, you had to tell the Bluetooth how to like say people's names. We're like, that's not how it's spelled. I'm like, the car doesn't care. It doesn't know yet. It's
honestly,
not smart enough.
That to me in 2012 sounds like probably one of the most frustrating jobs. I know once you know how to do it, but like I still fight with phones. Anyway, continue.
This is well before CarPlay and everything where you just plugged it in and it knew exactly what you wanted your settings. It was like you have to cater around to the car. But I did that because it was complicated and people didn't want to deal with it. So they're like, hey, high school kid, you go do this.
But it gets your foot in the door at the dealer.
Exactly why I did it. So I was like, hey, I'll do this. I want to be in the shop in the summer. And then they're like, well, we'll see. And I was like, okay. So they're like, hey, we love you. I was like, awesome. I want to be in the shop. Just come summertime, they're like, we really like you out here. I'm like, too bad. I want to be in the shop. So
you got to fight for what you want.
You got to stand up for yourself. Otherwise, someone's just going to try to veer you off to what works best for them.
Which in the mechanic community, I do think there's a lot of timid mechanics. Like there's a lot of mechanics are a little more introverted. It's weird because it has a very macho, like reputation. Like, sure. Oh, you work on cars, right? It's this like blue collar macho kind of thing. But the reality is like most mechanics I know are just like really talented, skilled craftsmen who just kind of want to keep to themselves a little bit. But you got to fight for your career if you want what you want.
You got to stand up for yourself. Otherwise someone's going to railroad you just because that's business.
So they let you in the shop in the summer?
Yeah, they didn't have much of a choice. It was like, hey, I'm going to be in the shop or I'm not going to work here anymore.
Yeah.
Let me in the shop in the summer. It was awesome. I was able to apprentice under somebody that was super helpful.
Yeah, you get a feel for like what it is to be in the atmosphere, and you finally get a view of like what it looks like as an actual mechanic in a real dealer.
Right, working on cars, as opposed to like I apprenticed somewhere when I was a kid. He helped me a lot. He's awesome. But this is my first like professional viewpoint of it, and I was like, doing oil changes and tires and stuff that every basic mechanic does.
But doing that 100, 1,000 times, you get pretty good. And you also learn how to do checks, because I'm sure there's times when you're like, ooh, almost let that out without an oil cap on the
you develop systems that I still use today.
It's funny because you still surgeons need to do this.
Of course,
surgeons forget to do things.
Yeah, it makes sense.
You got to have a checklist.
And you never know what you're going to find when you open a car up. So you got to have a checklist of what you're doing. Like, sure. I've got a thing every time I take an oil cap off, I put it in the way where the hood can't close, over on a street car, over the hood catch, on a rag, so it's visible, and you cannot shut the hood without the oil cap.
You hear that, guys? That's top tip. That's the top tip right there. I think things like that, I think should be pink.
Yeah, I mean,
It's bullshit that things
people
like
don't open their hood anyways or check the oil. Might as well be pink.
yeah, it should be fucking pink.
It might like not look great with dust and grime, but I understand.
All right, so you've gotten your foot in the door.
Gotten the foot in the door
Yep.
at the Volkswagen dealer. And that was awesome. Then I'm going to school, college for BMW Associate's Degree Program at Mass Bay up by us, Framingham, Ashland.
Yeah.
Technical school that has you do regular classes as well. So you get an associate's degree because that matters to some people, I think. No one's ever checked mine.
Well, I think it's no, isn't that, you make a big point. I've never had anyone say like, "Can I see your degree?"
Oh yeah. As far as everyone knows, I have a bachelor's. It doesn't matter. But no, I have an associate's degree that doesn't. It's literally in automotive related science, parentheses BMW.
Yeah.
But
I love that. I love that. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I'm like, how funny would it be if it was like Bachelor of Science, mechanical engineer, and then like parentheses BMW.
Yeah, and it like actually says that, which is hilarious. It's
really-
like, all right, I guess I'm the guy for the job. But I learned a lot in school, and that's what I got out of it. The degree's meaningless to me, but
It's not though, because it got it. The if you want to work in a BMW service center. You need to know how to work. That's like the minimum requirement.
1,000% the training was needed.
Yeah.
The actual piece of paper is I didn't necessarily need it, but I felt like I got more value out of it in case I didn't go on to be a mechanic for the rest of my life.
Sure. All right.
Which is still potential.
Graduate,
and I go to the BMW dealer. While I was in college there, I worked in parts to get my foot in the door. Same thing as the blue sheet thing. And they were like, I was like, hey, it's time for me to move in the shop. And they're like, hey, we really like in parts. And I was like, nope, got to stand your ground. Got to go in the shop. Let's go in the shop. And it was awesome. I was there for like 3 years, learned a bunch, and you just get your hands dirty. Well, in gloves, so not that dirty, but you get a feel for everything.
Yeah.
And you learn how to work on cars. And then the McLaren dealership near me was posted a position.
And that's hot because that's like new. Like a McLaren dealership existing was already like, whoa.
Yeah, there was like less than 20 of them in the country.
It might as well have been a museum at that point.
No one knew what it was.
Yeah, when you're in Norwell, you'd slow down just to, ooh, what's in there? It's orange.
Yeah, drive past it every night. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Nice wraith.
So this is just about the time where, let's see, I think you said 570S was just coming out.
570S was out, just starting to get massively popular, and the dealer I was at the time had more on-ground units than anywhere in the world.
Oh, wow.
So we saw a lot of cars before they got sold. Then 720S, I was there for the whole launch of that. And I left right as 600 LT was coming out, but was there for Senna, and that was very cool.
What was the first thing you were doing when you got that job?
So they were hiring, and the ad was super vague, and I ended up being for the Takata airbag recalls.
That's why it was vague.
It's incredible. Yeah, they're like, oh, do you want to like pull the dashboards out of these cars? And I was like, I mean, like I did brag about how much I like doing interior work, but I really should have been quiet about that.
Yeah,
I'll do it.
Never tell people you like doing shit you hate doing.
Yeah, I mean, it just happens because I was good at it. Doesn't mean that I wanted to do it all the time, but it got me the job, so it's okay to be more than proficient in areas that people don't necessarily want to do.
What does it look like pulling the dashboard out of a McLaren? Like, is it
tight?
Yeah. Is it very
tight.
Gluey and?
Yeah, there's a lot of glue going on in those cars. Weight savings, hardware is heavy.
Sure. Well, plus you're like, true. But like also that's a joke, but true. And also it's a carbon monocoque chassis.
Stuff rattles.
You're like, oh yeah. Oh God. Does it go back? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Are you better at gluing than
well, you didn't have to like unglue the dash from it, and they didn't set the bar super high with that, let me tell you.
Yeah.
But you put the car back I could confidently say that when a car was back together at that stage, and I'd taken apart more of them than the people who would necessarily on the line put them together. I was confident that it was better off than it was before I pulled it apart.
When you started working with McLarens, was it magical? Were you like, oh my God, I'm working with supercars? Or did it fade quickly to be like, oh, it's actually just a car and it's hand built, and holy shit, this requires more attention than the BMWs?
Yeah, it's you definitely learn that hand built should be
Maybe it's
grass differently than you would think.
Yeah, because everyone says hand built, like hand built. Like
but
it's
whose
like
hands were they?
Yeah, and you're like, was it on a Friday?
Were they
was
capable hands?
Yeah, and you start noticing the names because they usually like write the name on the cars.
They're all the guy who finally signed off on it was in the book, and like you know there, but
And you start to resent that guy.
it depends who it was.
And
you
you're
know,
like,
if you don't see the
that's,
same name all the time, you're like, oh, maybe they went through a couple people.
Yeah, another
but-
Chris fucking Johnson. Jesus Christ, no wonder it's rattling.
The built on a Friday cars or long weekend type of deal. Those cars exist at any manufacturer, but
what kind of stuff? I mean, all right, if you're a BMW tech, you know, you can pretty much know what you're going to see before anyone says anything. Someone brings in like an E90 335 and you're like, well, it's going to have a leaky rear main seal. There's going to be a valve cover gasket. And it's like, oh, by the way, he came in for tires, but I'm going to give him a list. Like you already know
he needs these other things.
Yeah,
E46. You see a lot of the cars.
E46 rolls in for an oil change and you're like, holy rear subframe.
Yeah, whoops.
And you're like, have you done these rod bearings?
Whatever. Oil looks like it didn't.
But for the most part, you know, like, okay, this car has 65,000 miles on it. It's an X3. It's an N55. We know what it's going to need. When it's a McLaren, a lot of times people aren't really putting real miles on these cars.
Yeah, which is a shame because if you got a good one, drive it.
If you got a good one. So what constitutes a good one?
Like when they come how often you like unplanned picnics.
Ooh.
If you like unplanned picnics, they're all good ones.
Yeah. Your tow truck driver determines how long you're sitting around on the blanket.
It can. It's always good to have a place with an enclosed carrier at your ready.
We're sitting at one right now.
Sure
Garage 42 has an enclosed carrier. So like maybe if you're a McLaren enthusiast who drives a lot of miles and you're sick of hearing like that, there's a big similarity because BMWs and McLarens both have the same treacherous, ominous bong. They're different bongs, but they are the same bong psychologically.
You're like, what is that? Is it 38 degrees or is something wrong?
Yeah, and I've heard them for a lot of different things on both cars, and I have probably only put maybe 1,000 miles on McLarens at most, and I probably still have as much psychological damage from the bongs in those cars than I do in my BMW that I put like 100,000 miles on.
I need to go on record saying if I had lottery money and needed an automatic car, I would. A 720S is like, that car's incredible.
So good.
When they like a 720S, a 675, like those cars are so good.
Comfortable.
Oh, so they just do everything. Like, what do you want it to do? It does it. And like, if it doesn't work, just like whatever.
You need a little bit of backup cash because sometimes things go wrong, but they're dumb things like the glass roof cracks.
Yep.
And you're like, huh. And then you're like, well, how much is that? And you're like, $7,500. And you're like, oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
I was going to eat.
Doors go up, prices go up. That's what happens.
I was going to eat, but I guess we're not going to do that. I guess we're going to make sure that it's not raining on me when I'm driving.
Yeah, 1,000%. If you're choosing between like going out and like if you have to cancel your vacation to fix the roof in your 720S, sell your car and get something else.
Now the good news is for most rich people, $7,500 is a single first class ticket to wherever the fuck you're going on vacation. So it's just a little blip in the radar for those people. But for me, that would be a pretty big game changer.
Oh yeah. It's definitely above my pay grade.
Yeah.
But they're great cars.
But what kind of stuff did you see like when they came in? Like PDIing a BMW must look a heck of a lot different than PDIing a hand-built McLaren.
Sure,
especially
does.
in those days.
Oh yeah,
they were. I'm sure they were figuring shit out.
Yeah, PDIing a brand new BMW. You're like, oh, this car's perfect. Let me, remove some plastics, put some floor mats in the car, and top it off with washer fluid, take it out of transport mode, and ship the thing.
Putting the floor mats in is probably the most time-consuming part of that process.
Oh yeah, 1,000%. Yeah,
that's all.
It's that was a PDI. You're like, yep, it's a car, and it works because it's mass produced, and they've got a great program for that.
Yep.
Cars that aren't mass produced, and I can't speak for all of them, but generally speaking, cars that aren't mass produced are a little quirkier, and you might find some stuff on PDIs that you might take some more tending to.
Right.
And
so like interior things, like maybe like peeling, or
some panels lifting maybe and stuff like that, and sometimes you see a bigger issue just because it was hand built and someone missed something.
Stuff doesn't line up.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
But you get good at that, right? I'd assume, like, you know, for me, like, for example, like my 911, I remember one door, it just didn't, you had to put so much force into closing it.
Sure.
And like Tim up at KMC was like, oh, it was like a bitch. I was so annoyed by it, but I didn't really know how to adjust that. And
Sure.
like, I don't know, that's my fault for not looking it up. But sometimes I just accept shit. And it was like great when you had like a capable mechanic who's just like, oh, I just have to adjust it. And I'm like, oh, you can do that? Now the door closes like it's brand new.
Yeah, it's crazy what a specialist can do.
So did you basically become a specialist with the McLarens? And
for what I was doing, it's the three of us that worked there at the time. You get to know those cars inside out. You're like, okay, I got to adjust this, and this, and you're gonna get a better end result for it. And I really enjoyed my time there. I drove a lot of the cars. I took them to a bunch of shows and stuff like that. I would like often rotate through the used inventory just to keep the flat spots off the tires. And every time I drove a car that was sitting on the lot, I'd find something that was wrong with it and then get that fixed, and the customer ends up with a better vehicle.
Absolutely.
And it made for a much better experience for everyone. And, I get to drive some pretty cool cars all the time.
Yeah, it's important to have a punch list going with some of these cars because they require it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to apologize for publishing this right now, because now every time a McLaren pulls into Larson Energy Cars and Coffee, they're probably going to be like, hey, you're the guy who can help me with the thing. And they're going to ask you questions. Can you look at this door?
Like, hey, guys, it's been a while. It was like, I don't know. There's plenty of people there to take care of that professionally. But unless it's got a roll cage, I don't touch it anymore.
Yeah. So how long were you at McLaren?
Great question. 2 years-ish, 2.5 years maybe.
And what brought you, what changed that?
I just needed to change the pace. I was like, okay, I thought this high-end exotic thing at a mechanic level was for me. It was different than I thought. Let me reassess. I kind of felt that way. And then my dad was opening up his fifth restaurant.
Which one?
The Parrot. No.
Oh yeah.
And so he's got 5 different spots. I grew up in the restaurant industry, so I always have that mentality. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. But most people do.
Genuinely salivating right now because the Parrot has the best muscles in the fucking world.
Oh, dude, they're awesome.
The broth is psychotic. And everywhere it's my benchmark for muscles, but everywhere I go since I've had those muscles, I'm even at really nice restaurants, I'm like always maybe a little disappointed in what I'm getting, because I'm like, oh, that's actually, because when I'm ordering them, I want the Parrot muscles.
It's awesome. Yeah, those muscles are like more than 20 years in the making.
Who invites you to this Turner thing?
So between McLaren and Turner, I went to the family business full time.
Right.
And COVID happened, and I was like, hey, I got this whole other skill set. I'm going to go do it. I can make money doing that. Worry about paying people that cannot do something else.
Yeah. And your dad's probably like just struggling to keep shit together.
Well, no one knew what was going on.
And you don't know how long it's going to last.
He ended up being restricted for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, I got this whole other skill set. I'm going to go back to cars. And a friend of mine from McLaren, Michelle, hit me up, and she was like, hey, do you want to come, do you want to come work at Lamborghini as, service advisor?
Sure.
And I said, yeah, I'll give it a go. Like, why not? She's like, the technical side of stuff and you can talk to people. Awesome.
Okay. Yeah.
Did that for a little bit.
Intermediate thing. Just to be like, well, you know what? I'm working. I'm doing things.
Yeah, making real money, which is cool.
That's true.
And, around super cool stuff, which is awesome. But I was like, okay. And then a friend of mine called and he's like, hey, I need a really good mechanic that can
Where'd
travel.
this guy come from?
He's someone I used to work with at BMW,
Okay.
Sean. Yeah, he's awesome.
Hi, Sean.
Hi, Sean. If he's listening to this, shout out to Sean. If everyone else that's listening to this,
So it's just a cold call.
Kind of more or less. But he was like, hey, we used to work together and I know you've always been interested in doing this type of work. Are you still interested? And I said, yeah, dude, let's figure out. Let's go talk. Let me do a day wear stage up there and see what's up.
Sure.
And
wow, that is so industry. That is so restaurant to be like, let's go stage at Turner Motorsport.
Yeah, I was like, I gotta go check it out. Make sure you vibe with
That's
the crew.
great. Yeah.
And that was like Will's big thing was like, and Brew and everyone on the team was like, hey, like, let's make sure we can work together.
Sure.
We spend over 100 days a year together. Just traveling. Never mind never mind like the time we spend together at the shop. Like,
no,
we gotta vibe.
You gotta vibe. You gotta be able to sit next to each other comfortably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like sometimes share an armrest for a lot of times in an airplane. But it was a good fit. And I was like, okay, like let me get into doing this full time. So I start full time with them as a mechanic under Sean on 96, the Turner Motorsport GT4. It's in the Michelin Pilot Challenge GS. They race with TCR at the same time. All semantics. I'm sure it's written somewhere. But I start as a mechanic under him, and he's showing me the world of race cars. And I was like, okay, I've worked on performance cars before. There's got to be a lot of carryover. Newsflash, there's not.
Yeah,
Race cars are their own thing.
But like a GT4 is still like very similar. It's just that everything's beefed up and everything is like going to fail. I guess
GT4s are like awesome because it was a perfect carryover for me as a street car mechanic, because it's still a lot of street car, at least for the BMW. You're dealing with a lot of streetcar stuff. The knowledge I learned at school still translates to stuff. Certain modules that are still in the car still called certain things, and acronyms, and all that stuff I spent that is embedded in my brain is still there. The hardest thing was like the things that are important are way different. Nobody cares if you scratch the car. Like nobody cares if you scratch the car. Yeah. Nobody cares if you scratch a wheel. They prefer if you scratch a wheel if it means you're doing a tire change quicker.
Yeah.
And that was like, whoa, I gotta like learn all this. You made a comment earlier about my, dirty hands. I haven't had dirty hands working on cars since I started working on race cars.
Yeah.
Well, since I didn't have dirty hands working on cars from like my first shop until race cars. Everything in between was gloves and super clean, and you don't have time to do that on these cars. It's a different priority.
How do they start you off with these cars? Like how do you go from, hey, there's this race car, to like you're gonna have, if you're a mechanic on these race cars, it means that you need to be able to diagnose, understand, and look at the like really quick. You're not
Lifetime,
like, you're not pulling the car in and be like, all right, let me just like have my coffee, put it on the lift, take a poke around. Oh, let's see. I'm seeing a little bit of a leak over here. Let's just see. I mean, you're doing this now, or else the race is over and you're retiring the car. So how do you get familiar enough with the car to like, I mean, do you just have it like you building it?
So when I started, ironically, we were on the F82 GT4s. For people who don't speak BMW, it was the one with the small kidneys before the big old kidneys.
Yeah.
And we had one of those at the shop when I started that was essentially on a rotisserie it was just bare. Yeah. Like it had been in a big accident. It had gotten a new front frame rail or two, strut towers, and like basically firewall forward was brand new from the body shop. And they were like, hey, this was a car. We'd like it to be a car again.
So you got to play the game of like just assembling a thing and getting familiar with every nut and bolt.
Yes, and in live time of me also working on the race cars, like what we were doing setup wise and stuff like that. Like it was like, okay, well, how's this car work? Well, I put it together from the bare chassis. Like you keep that in your memory as much as you can, and it teaches you that car, which was very helpful, but also like a huge undertaking because you got not like a junkyard pile of bolts, but like everything's condensed. It's not laid out like those fancy Porsche ads, I think.
Yeah, that's the only way I could do it, honestly.
Oh yeah, the exploded diagram of everything's there and it's all in the right order. Like that's not real world. That takes up too much space.
How many parts were left over?
I don't do leftover parts.
You just throw them in the trash.
I don't do leftover parts. Every part that's on a race car is supposed to be there.
You managed to save all this weight. Conor, it's a miracle.
Oh no, if I saved all the weight, they'd make sure to add plates to the car. The car goes over the scales every time you're at TED, and it has to be a certain way.
That's true.
So just make sure all the right stuff's on it, because it needs to be there.
Just a trunk full of washers.
They're very strict on where your ballast is and those things.
I would imagine.
But it's you put it together and it helped. And that car actually, the first time it was going out, we're in Newton, New Hampshire. It's like 10 minutes north of Haverhill, Mass.
Okay.
And the first time this car goes on the track after I put it together, and I did not take this car apart. And it was from the chassis. The car's going to Laguna Seca, which for people who don't know is on the other side of the country in California, 3,000 miles away. So I was like, okay, well, I hope everything's like good and fine, because that car is very far away and it took a lot of effort to get it there. So
and you didn't get to shake it down.
Shakedowns aren't a thing as like the streetcar mechanic of, let me take this for a ride and see if the noise is gone. I'm like, no, that's not a thing. And if you're trying to fix
you fired it up and you're like, oh, dude, we ran, and there's codes and it's seemingly running and it
seems fine.
The thermostat's opening and
the cooling system, like it's all good. They're all vacuum filled on those things, but you know what I mean.
But you're concerned with like, oh god, I hope this like rear end is gonna stay on the car.
Everything, I hope I didn't miss something. And that goes away because of the level of confidence you have putting these cars together, because you do it so often.
Right.
which is, you know, in the long term, but it helps. But
How long did it take you to put that car together the first time?
Way too long. Something I'm not recording.
Okay. No, but I like that you said that, because like that would be me, where they'd be like, geez, is he still putting that fucking car together?
Yeah, I'm sure.
That would be me 100%.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure if Bruce listening to this, he's like, yeah, way too long. But it was together, and it actually won a race at Road Atlanta, which was awesome for me, because I was like, wow, I put that car
That's
together.
the one. What if, all right, so today, let's pretend you get that car on the rotisserie today. You had taken it apart.
Yep.
And now how long would it take you to get that car like on the track?
Great question.
Ballpark. I don't know. You don't have to give me minutes, but like.
So if you're going from, so we actually have one of those right now where we have a car that's tubbed, we're switching over.
Yeah.
If you're to do it, it's usually not just you doing it by yourself, which helps, because if it's a whole team effort, it's different. You got to really thrash on the thing. You're probably looking at, if you're thrashing on the thing, like long days, you could get it done in not a race situation, like maybe a week, probably 2.
Okay.
But
So
that's like a lot of work with like 3 people.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
like soup to nuts. That's like a bare chassis to like seat belts.
Yeah, it's. I mean, racing's, I've found, is a lot about, you got to do the most with the time that you have.
Yeah.
And you can't miss deadlines, so you have to make it happen.
Yeah.
And you try to be efficient, but you can't skip things.
But like 7 to 14 days to go from no car to functional race car that can be shaken down on track by a driver who has not even seen the car yet.
Sure,
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's. Feel free to get back to me when I have to do this and see how long it actually took me. But I'd like to say the first one that I got that was completely apart, and I was just working on it every day and figuring it out. Probably took me like a month to put it together. Like I didn't take this car apart. I've never taken one of these apart.
I know that that's too long, but I'm also very impressed because you know what it looks like to have your own project car.
Right.
And you also know what it looks like when your friends have project cars that, let's say you met a friend when you were 17 and they had a project car, and now we're in our like 30s and you're like, hey, that car is basically in the same state it was when we met.
Yeah, it's worse. It's rustier, and there's
like,
jack stands to the floor. Yeah.
So to be like, oh yeah, we went from nothing to a functional car that can like win a race in 2 weeks is pretty fucking good.
Yeah, I mean, and keep in mind, that's not like weekends and stuff. That's like a 40-hour work week. But you're doing that during the thing. It's not like you're working 7 days, 365. But it's yeah, it's cool.
You mentioned it's so Turner's in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
So you drive from South Shore all the way up there every day?
Yeah, I'm crazy.
How many miles are on that Challenger now?
Too many. So
How many?
167,000.
Wow.
I bought it with 36,000 miles on it, and now it doesn't have that.
Holy shit, that's
Yeah.
awesome. And it's still running okay? And
Yeah. Luckily, I
treat
know
you
a
okay?
decent mechanic. It's me.
Turns out you're the SRT mechanic you always wanted to be.
Yeah.
All you had to do was buy one.
Yeah, all I had to do was work on it myself, which, as you can imagine, the last thing a mechanic wants to do is work on their own car. But, you got to make it happen. I don't bring my car to anyone else for anything because I don't need to. But
Yeah.
it's funny how that works. And when I was buying that car, someone was like, yo, you work on BMWs. Why don't you drive an M2? Why don't you drive this? I was like, I want something so painfully simple that it just works, and I enjoy the rudimentary aspect of it.
That's why my daily drivers now are the Honda and the Lexus.
That makes perfect sense.
And it's like, everyone's like, why didn't you wait for the new Lexus? I'm like, because it's got more shit.
Yeah,
I don't want more
stuff.
shit.
I don't want more stuff.
I just
Yeah.
want the V8 that I literally could never do an oil change in that V8.
Yeah.
And it would probably still run for 100,000 miles.
Yeah, and still run like fine.
I'm going to do the oil changes. But
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to do anything.
It's you don't have to do anything, which is nice. My car asked me for like almost nothing its entire existence.
And you get to go to AutoZone and get like a jug of oil. You don't have
which
to
is great.
go-
I'm not getting 1060.
No!
Like, it's not happening.
Fucking, I thank God I had FCP Euro on my side when I had the
awesome.
E92, because like they were sending me oil,
Yeah, it's great.
and I was like, thank you,
Yeah,
because
appreciate it.
like I mean it was like 100, even Liqui Moly I think was still like $150 a shot.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
Shout out Liqui Moly. They sponsor everything forever.
Fucking A, right? God damn,
they-
I love Liqui Moly.
They're great.
Dude.
Them and H&R Springs have been like some of Will's longest sponsors forever. They're always on a livery. Like,
So crazy.
And they come to races a lot, and they're so nice, and everyone to deal with it. They're fantastic.
What does a season look like for you? So we're starting the season. You're getting out on the road.
Mhm.
and there you just have a calendar and flights.
Yeah, essentially. So
What do you bring? Do you have?
I bring a carry-on suitcase. It's a little beat up, and a backpack.
Okay, so all your tools are on
It's on the
toter
hauler.
home or a hauler, yeah.
Yep. We load the trailers ourselves. So the three of us, the primary mechanics for the GT4 cars, and GT3 works this way too in our house, and I assume in most teams. I can only speak for my team, but this is the way it makes sense. Is the mechanics are at the shop full time. There are flying mechanics as well. I'll get to that in a second, but the full time mechanics are loading the hauler with the cars, with the tools, with the parts, and making sure that their home away from home is ready to go in case anything happens to the car. And your toolbox goes up there. I got like a little Blue Point roll cart that I work out of, because you keep in mind, for everyone that works on cars, I'm only working on one car. I'm working on 4 of them, but only one of them. So you only need certain stuff. I don't have all my tools in that toolbox because you don't need them. You need everything to take every bolt off that car that you can fit. And the truck has special tools and stuff like that.
Do you decide what spares you're going to bring?
No, thankfully. My crew chief does that, as
Okay.
well as we do. We all talk about it, where it's like, okay, what do we think we're going to need, and what have we seen us need, and we need a lot of. It's not just like what could break. It's like what breaks in a hit, what can get this car back on track, what's going to prevent that from happening.
What naturally dies on these cars that you didn't expect to see? Because you've coming from working in a dealer network where you worked on street cars, where you're like, oh, okay, here's a BMW with 200,000 miles on it, and it needs this bearing or blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, okay, that's what happens in a 24-hour race that you're like, fuck me, I can't believe this breaks on a car.
So for the 24-hour races,
Or anything.
Yeah, the GT3 guys are running that. I'm lucky enough to, be an extra body for GT3 and see what those guys are doing, and that stuff's insane. But our races are 4 to 2 hours depending on what's going on. There's 2 4-hour races. Everything else is a 2-hour.
What's a wear item that you're shocked is a wear item?
Everything's a wear item. The whole car is a consumable. And if you think it's anything besides that, you're wrong. Like it's every single piece in that car is a wear item. That's and it's like crazy. The chassis times out. I'm going to use the term timeout.
Sure.
At like 30,000 kilometers, where it's like, okay, this chassis is spent.
Yeah, there's
like,
enough potential propagating cracks and things like that. Yeah,
so BMW is a fantastic list, and everything with a GT4 spec, a GT3 spec, like real factory built race cars or factory backed race cars, have timeout lists, and they're saying, okay, at 5,000 kilometers you do X, Y, Z, and because they fail over this point. At 10,000 kilometers you do this, and until at 12,000 kilometers you do this. 50,000 kilometers, you don't have the car anymore, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
But they've got a list of things that they're shown in training and testing in simulation break. Replace these beforehand.
It's all preventative
heavy maintenance.
Yeah. So what's something that broke that I'm sure you still learn things. I'm sure you still, like, if you follow that procedure and you just replace those things on time, is there anything that you're just like, whoa, turns out this goes too?
Yeah, definitely. It's you do, the timeout lists aren't always 100% accurate, but they are very good. But it's also just the ballpark, right? Because you don't know if you're at a track that loads up a certain wheel bearing more than you would expect. You could see that going quicker. You're always checking wheel bearings. You're always nut and bolting the car and making sure that everything's together. And you're just going over everything with a fine tooth comb, and there's nothing that necessarily fails like consistently way quicker, because they'll update the timeout. They'll say, okay, this has been failing at 3,000 kilometers across all these cars. Like, you replace it then.
Do you guys report that stuff to BMW?
All the
like
time.
Factory, like just to be like, hey, these are the issues that we're seeing, and then they collect that data and update their.
Yeah, all the time. We work directly with the BMW Motorsport. They're fantastic. And they do a really, really good job they're always at the track, and they're very involved with us and with the other GT4 teams. I'm speaking from the GT4 side of things, but we have an engineer there that's, we got a problem. They're plugging into the car and seeing what they can do. They're sending the data right back to Germany, and or whomever's taking a look at it, making damage reports, making fault reports, and getting a solution as quick as possible.
So what's the most technical job you've had to do in a paddock?
My first race ever, we had to do a motor. That was fun. Engine, sorry, everybody. But
Fuck them. If people are gonna be like, motors are electric, these are engines, then please, before you email this tiny podcast, I would like you to call General Motors. I would like you to call Ford Motor Company.
Yep.
There's like a long list. Honda Motor isn't Honda Motor Company. Like, I would like everyone to just deal with them first.
Yeah,
You
it's
can
also,
call it whatever the fuck you want.
we're also in America, so it's a hood, not a bonnet, but here we are.
I got yelled at about saying aluminium as aluminum, and I said, well, we haven't been required to say that since 1776, so
I
I'm
love that.
pretty sure we're good. I'm allowed to say aluminum. What do you think about the crossover between the GT4 cars that you work on versus like an M4 in the like a consumer M4? Like, how close are these things? When you see a car at a car show, are you looking at that going like, oh my God, this really is very similar? Or are you just seeing like complete differences between the way these are constructed?
So that's one of the coolest things about GT4 is it's very close. And like the M4 GT4 is the same drivetrain. It's the same. It's not a beefed up transmission. It's the same transmission. It's the same engine, and the rear end's different because it doesn't have the E-diff. I don't know if they're still doing that in modern G82 stuff, but it's got a motorsport differential in it. But you were dealing with a lot of street car stuff on GT4, and that makes it harder in some aspects. But also it's cool because I get to use that like street car mechanic side of things. And I thought that like, okay, I worked on exotics, and sure, like you're working on performance cars. There should be, a significant amount of carryover to working on race cars, and I was shocked at how different it was.
You're fixing these cars, but suddenly you're thrown into, I don't know how often you're doing this or what the frequency of this is, but you got to be like a gunner and in the pit crew. So what does it take to go from, okay, we're the guys waiting for the car to come in to do some maintenance, or we're the guys who are fixing shit that like, okay, it got taken off the track, we need to replace, an axle or something like that, to I am mounting a wheel during a fuel stop or like a tire change? Like how does that work? How do you get tapped for that?
So in NASCAR, those guys are all old like D1 athletes. Like they picked athletes and taught them how to do this specific task.
That makes a lot of sense.
Like those guys are incredible. They're not all like that, but their job is to be a pit crew.
Yeah.
In IMSA, that's not the case. It's for most of us. I can't speak for everybody. I don't know, but we're for the GT3 pit crew, for the GT4 pit crew, for the GT3 pit crew, and the GT4 pit crews. Thanks for pointing at the mic so I can get closer to it.
Don't worry about it.
We are the mechanics that go on the pit crew. So when I first started, my first race ever, I was like what they call the wand. So I have all the GT4 cars have air jacks built into them. These pistons that come down from the bottom of the car and lift the car.
You've got to put the air in the hood.
Some of them are in the hood. Ours is in the back in the trunk.
Okay, I like that better.
Yep, it's I do too. So you take this like air lance thing, just like a blue wand. I don't know, about 2 feet long.
Plug it into the car.
Yeah, you plug it into the car. Car goes up, and then there's a rule in Michelin Pilot Challenge. There's only so many people you can have over the wall at the same time.
Got it.
So as the front tire changer is waiting on me to get out of the way.
So you plug in the second it's made a connection, you're over the wall again.
So you have to plug in confidently knowing it made the connection.
Right.
You don't have time to look at it.
Right.
Yeah, I have to be back over the wall so that I'm not slowing down the front tire changer. This is what I used to do. I'm now a tire changer. So I had to get out of the way so that they can do their job. Then when the rear tire changer is coming around, I have to pass him the tire, which that's now my job. But I used to pass them the tire and then pull the old tire and just, you can work from the other side of the wall you can't be on the hot side, essentially. So that was the first job in the pit crew, was the air wand, and then that was cool. You're in a fire suit and you're doing the whole thing and part of the pit stop. But now I'm changing tires, and that's awesome. Like you're much more involved.
What is it like the first time you change a tire during a race?
There's a lot going on, and there's a lot going on around you, but you're so focused on what you're doing, you you have to be aware, like you try not to get hit by other cars, and
it's fucking dangerous. This is the thing. I like the pit crew guys. They have a more to me. I'm like, well, look, the drivers are in a cage with a. Sure. I mean, you've still probably got helmet, gloves, fire suit, all that good stuff too.
Yeah, definitely.
But you're still a smushy human.
Definitely, yeah, super smushable if like by a car.
And it's during what I would consider the most frantic moments in all of the race, which is like, the
Everyone
guy
pits under yellow.
everyone's coming in, and then they're fighting for position out of the pits, and you're fucking standing there. That's like, I don't even like walking through grocery store parking lots, and you're standing. I mean, granted, these are professionals, we get that, but like they're competitive professionals,
right?
And they're maybe hot-headed because something happened earlier in the race. And
everyone's trying to make up position. You know that's. If you've got a good team behind you, you can get a lot of positions out of the pit. You can also lose a lot of positions in the pits if something goes wrong and you're not prepared to deal with it.
So is this something that you're going to consistently do or graduate into other things in the pit? Or is it just like, okay, well, like when they need me, I'll do a tire change, or how does that work?
No, it's I'm doing it full season. Yeah. So that this is now my job on the pit crew full time.
That's insane. So what exactly is your station right now?
So I'm the rear tire changer on 96 GS.
Both sides?
Yep, both sides. Yep.
Wow.
So somebody goes at the way we do it.
Tell me how this works. How do you learn? Like they say, we want you to be the rear tire changer on this car. Then what? Like,
well, first and foremost,
what's
you
the
gotta
training
try out
like?
for it.
Yeah. Tell me about it, because this is fast. I don't know anything about this. So like, to me, it's like, I get it. If you want to be on the varsity soccer team in high school, you train during the summer on your own, and then you go to the tryouts for like 2 weeks, and then you decide if you make the cut or you go to JV or you don't make anything.
Sure.
Well, all right. What the fuck does this look like as an adult ass man who's like, I want to be on this team? Like, how does that work?
So you already working on the team, which is helpful, definitely. But basically, the position came available. The gentleman that I worked under, Sean, left, and he was the rear tire changer. So the position was available. It was up to myself and someone else, and everyone wants to be the rear tire changer, and because it's awesome. It's like just simply because it's awesome.
Sure,
like that's the only thing. Well, some people want to be front tire changer. That's great too.
Idiots.
They released the car. It's just
kidding,
different.
I'm kidding.
But like everyone wants to change tires on a pit crew because I always did. I can't speak for everyone.
Right. So this happens just at the garage, and you're like, they're just like running drills.
Yeah. Drills are a thing. Basically, it's like, okay, well, every tenths of a second matter.
What does a tryout look like?
Here's a wheel gun and a wheel, and go pull it off the car. Like, how we're timing you. Like, what does your time look like? And where can we make up time? And, are you sloppy? Are you not?
Are they simulating it like the car came in, someone is putting the car up on the jack, or is the car already up and you're just swapping tires on a car that's just already off the ground?
So for our case, like a lot of people have probably seen the NASCAR guys that someone's driving the car, they slide into the box, and everyone's doing that. We don't do that just because we just don't like do the full slide and everything like that.
You don't have to make excuses. I'm just trying to get a picture of what this looks like.
Sure. So the car's sitting up on jacks, because you don't want to waste the nitrogen. You do have to try to still be resourceful. The car will be sitting up on the air jacks, and you'll start from, your position of, okay, you're essentially standing on a pit wall. Like, here's the line of the pit wall, or we'll be standing on something.
And the second you cross that line, that's when the stopwatch goes.
Oh no, they say 3, 2, 1, go, and then you go. So it's up to you to cross the line in the time that matters.
Okay.
And then you immediately go to what you would first do. And you're carrying your tire with you in Michelin Pilot. There's not like a tire handler. So you're running out with like a 60-pound wheel and tire, jumping off a wall with an air gun in your other hand, and you're pulling hose with you. And then you have to get down as quickly as possible and accurately in front of this wheel, place your tire in a way that it's not going to cost you time, but it's not going to be in the way. And then immediately go to pulling the wheel off, and it's all 5-lug.
Now, when you've pulled that wheel off, are you rolling it to the wall so someone can catch it, or what happens to that wheel?
So you got to
just go down, just put it down flat.
You put it down flat on the outside, pending there's nobody behind you. So you can't get in someone else's way. Like if there's a car, if a car hits the wheel in your box, then that's a penalty on you.
Okay.
And you don't want your own car to hit the wheel. So you need to place it far enough away, like within arms, you're stretching.
But not so far that you're wasting time.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so now you get this wheel on. where do you get the second wheel from? You run back to the wall?
No, you run around the car. So you got that wheel on, you get up, either take your tire with you or leave it, depending on the situation. And then you run around to the other side of the car, drop to your knees, pull the wheel off, and then the wand is handing you your second tire.
Okay, so
he can reach you from the wall.
You're going there bare to the outside wheel, basically.
No, outside wheel, you're bringing your tire.
Inside wheel. Inside wheel.
Yep.
Okay, so you start on the outside, you come back to the inside, closer to the pit
That's
wall.
the way I do it. Yeah.
Okay, and then you are only bringing that outside one. You're running basically with nothing to the inside wheel, pulling that off, and then the wand guy's handing you your next tire.
Yes.
Got it.
If there's nothing behind me that I'm obstructing.
Got it.
But if we all pit at once, you got to pull your tire with you.
How fast can you do this?
Well, it's so in time stops, I'm like very consistently like 31 seconds right
That's
now.
insane.
Yeah, I mean, it could be quicker. I'm actively trying to be quicker. I've had quicker times, but consistently 31 seconds right now.
What is the most time limiting thing in a pit stop? Is it that, or are you guys, when you're done with that, is the car still being fueled or something at the same time?
You gotta, you have to beat fuel. That's the kind of the name of the game. So
Okay.
if there's more service required, you can do it, or just so you're not the one that's holding up. But you don't know if you're gonna get 16 seconds of fuel, like they only want to do 2 tires, or you don't know if you're gonna get a full fuel load. Is done within 48 seconds usually. And that's like
So that must feel good though. If let's say you had a shitty tire change for you, let's say it's 34 seconds, but it's a 48-second fuel stop. Well, you're still done before the car can be released.
Yeah, that's the name of the game. You got to be done before the car gets released.
So you must go, oh, okay, it wasn't my best, but I didn't hold anybody up.
There is some wiggle room in that situation, but that's from completely empty to completely full. Race car
Right.
never comes in completely empty.
No.
So it's going to be quicker than 48 seconds. Sometimes it's 40 seconds. A lot of the time it's very close to the same amount of time of tires. So anytime that you can save, you try.
Have you ever had a bad day where you're just like, oh, fuck, like I fucked it?
I mean, I don't kind of let that stuff right there. And keep in mind that as we're recording this, I'm going up to do my 3rd race of rear tire changing.
Super fresh.
Yeah.
I just mean like, how does it work on the team? Like, let's say someone's just they're just off. It's not their day.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens, right? Are they pulling you and be like, okay, we're going to put Jimmy on?
If there's a potential for that.
Yeah.
It's that
trying to
hasn't happened to me, but it's you definitely gotta pull your own weight and make it happen. Because
I'm just trying to get a feel for like it must be really competitive, and it's wild because we're looking at a race outside of the race. Like most people look at car racing and they're looking at pit time, but the race is the car going around the track
Right.
to most observers.
Sure.
And then there's this whole other ecosystem of competition and competitors in the pit crew.
Oh yeah.
And that to me is like fascinating because that's a different animal. And it's, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, probably more dangerous or at least prone to different injuries. Like, I mean, to me, I'm not just saying, oh, you might get your squishy human body might get hit by a car.
Which is a thing, but like you don't even think about it.
I'm thinking like you are rushing with heavy things. To me, that's a back injury.
Right. And it's definitely an abusive situation, like body wise. Like it just is, because you're doing everything you can to make it happen. And it's there a lot of you can definitely get hurt, but you almost don't, like, you're trying not to get hurt so you can continue to do your job, but you're like it's almost an afterthought. Like there's this video of this guy out there who was changing tires, I think in Cup. It was a NASCAR thing. It was, and they have to pull their fuel jug so that the guy can do the inside tire. So when he pulls and something's wrong with the socket, or he just misses the socket slightly, it sparks and he catches on fire.
Oh,
and he's sitting there on fire waiting for someone to pass on the tire so that he can put it back on. Then he worries about it. Like, and your fire suit's rated for, like, you're fine. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be on fire for 10 seconds if you're doing like an inside. If you're sitting there waiting for your tire long enough that you're burned through your fire suit, the stop's destroyed anyways. But like, tire's getting on the car, you got to go leave. And then he dealt with it like afterwards. But like, I found it's like such an afterthought where like, I have to do this one thing and anything can happen in this one thing. And then like, I'll worry about it in a second.
I don't know what your, history is with competitive? Is this like your first kind of like competitive sport, let's say, like in terms of doing stuff like this? Or do you feel like the restaurant industry kind of made you feel like, oh, I'm competing with myself all the time because it's all about tack time?
Sure. It's not my first competitive sport. I played rugby for a while in high school and middle school, and played football and stuff like that.
Do you get the same rush out of this? Like, is it similar?
It's so much more of a rush than I've had doing anything else. Because you're sitting on, you're not sitting, you're standing on the pit wall, cars coming down pit lane, and so all your comms are tied together. So you've got the engineer on the stand, and the car's talking to the engineer, but sometimes talking to you guys. And the car's coming down pit lane. You're standing there all geared up. You've got your wheel gun, your wheel, and your heart's beating like everything's super loud, but your heart's beating like a million minutes, and that's all you hear. And you have to time it so the car is actively pulling the box as you're like in the air, because you can't touch down too quickly, and like you gotta like try to remember how to breathe. I still gotta figure that out.
Yeah.
But there's so much going on, and there's like nothing like it.
What's your prep responsibility when you're there? Like all right, you're getting everything. Race hasn't even started yet.
Sure.
What are you doing before the car's released? Like, what are you setting up in your area? What are you checking? What are your pre-flight checks before anything happens?
In regards to like before a pit stop or like before the race starts? The car's already at the grid. Like, I don't have to worry about that.
Cars at grid, and you're just looking around your area being like, okay, I assume you're the one laying out your shit. You're the one who's like, okay, I've got my gun. It's actually plugged into air. Like, what are you checking?
So you check all that, but we have guys that work in the pit that set all that stuff up for us, which are awesome.
So
Stu
it's pretty
and
much
Sean
set.
And
okay.
Wes, they're great.
All right. But so there's a trust there that you're like, oh, this is gonna work. Like they've given it to me. Or are you sitting there going, like,
you're definitely doing that. You're checking your air
pressure
pressure because it's on you if it fails. It's not on someone else for not plugging it in.
Yeah.
It's your equipment. You have to make sure
Are you walking in the back and counting your tires and being like, oh, I actually have my rack?
I do look at it, but we have guys that are doing exactly tire stuff, and I'm like, if there were tires there, I would know. If there were all rains and it was just sunny, I'd be like, hey, what's up? But
when you get back in from a pit stop, are you just going back to your chair, or are you all having like a team meeting to be like big wins and big losses? Like, are you having a chat?
So I don't like sit often at these things.
Oh,
I'm just like standing. I'm standing most of the time. I'm watching we have like a 14-16 way view of the race that you guys don't see, where they're picking. We have the camera angles from every corner that they're picking for television. We get like that live stream, so you're watching your car go around the track.
Right, but is anyone? The car's just been released. You've done your job. Is anyone talking to you?
Yep. So we're all figuring out. We're all resetting our stuff immediately. Because just because you put a set of tires on the car right then and there doesn't mean it's not getting a puncture on the outlap and coming right back in. So
that's a good point.
You need to be ready to do that again immediately within a lap, a minute and a half.
Yeah.
At some places, it's you got to be ready to do that again, and you don't know when it's going to happen.
And where does it go from here now? So this is your third season.
Yep, third season,
and now you've got like kind of a big boy job on the back of the car, like actually doing the thing. What's like the upward mobility on a pit crew, and where do you want to be next?
So from here, if you can be like a car chief, and then above the car chief's the crew chief. The car chief's the person running the car, and right now, doing that with somebody, like we're peers. Like there's the hierarchy thing isn't needed until it's needed. But you can always like, if you're like making the call on what happens to the car, you're the car chief, but then there's a crew chief above you that makes a call above you. So if you're like, hey, like this is my car, I'm making this call. If they disagree with you, they tell you.
Right.
So you can be that guy, and then you can be the crew chief, and then it never gets to Ricky Bobby, but
that's a fucking shame,
isn't it?
Yeah. It's weird that you can't just steal a car.
I mean, you can. Like Nicolas Cage did a couple of them one night, but you can do stuff like that. There's also other series, like if you want to be into Formula One or NASCAR or anything that travels more than we do. I'm gone like 100 days a year. which to me is the right amount.
Yeah.
I don't really want to be gone more than that.
No, it's a lot.
Yeah, I don't have any interest in being gone all over the world for 10 months a year. Like, it's like Formula One doesn't appeal to me in that regard at this time of my life. I like being home, seeing my friends and family.
Dude, I hear you. I used to do the travel gig for a while, and it's taxing. And there's a level where it's fun, and then there's a level where you're like, wow, I am alone.
Yeah, I mean, it's you get the same familiar continental breakfast, but it's not what you're looking for. And
yeah, IHG points are only so good.
Yeah, they're great.
And then you're like, okay,
you're like, oh man, that cinnamon bun like that in that warm tray isn't really hitting like it used to.
Yeah, it's not. It's no longer as continental as it was. But anyway, all right, we could go on and on and on forever, but I really appreciate you coming out here and talking to us and kind of enlightening a mechanics version of going from entry level of fixing cars and an interest in fixing cars to a competitive level of pit crew in IMSA.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me, man. It's everyone asks the question all the time, and I wish I figured out how to condense it more. I guess I still could. But
no, it's fine.
It's
this is good because I think there's a lot of people out there who are doing exactly this. I mean, there's a million people out there in school right now at like either small colleges or these technical universities and all this stuff. Like, this is a big deal. And there's a ton of people in high schools right now who are doing their first shop class. They're tearing down an engine for the first time. They're learning what a camshaft is. They're learning how a drivetrain works. They're learning how to reassemble a differential. Right. And that is the core of what it all is. And if they want it to be their career, but they want it to be an interesting career, and they don't just, because everyone has a different vibe, right? There's people who are really comfortable. This is my lift. I'm going to go in every single day and I'm going to do my project. I'm going to get out.
Yep.
They could do that at a dealership. They could do it at a restoration shop where they say, this is my car. I'm going to put 30,000 hours into this 300 SL and it will win concourse events all over the country or the world. And I will be proud of the fact that I built this car. Right. And then there are people who need a dopamine rush, which I think is along the lines of what you're doing, where you need to be able to like accomplish something, execute it, and know that I could shave a half a second off of that.
Yeah, and you just, that's part of the reward for it, is like just doing it in a matter that you can improve, and then you've got a team behind you that's also helping you to improve.
Yeah.
We record all of our stops and we're watching the videos, and all of us are going over like, hey, what if you moved your hand that way? How would that help? Or what if you placed this here? And we're breaking it down to everything we can do. And someone who's better at the stop than I am is showing me pointers. That stuff's super cool.
So if anyone's questioning if this is a sport, if that sentence alone doesn't tell you that this is a competitive sport and people are like really hardcore into making this something, faster and better and more efficient, well, I don't know what else to tell you, but thank you guys so much for listening. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I will see you in the next podcast.